One of the smallest countries in South America, Guyana is situated in the northeastern corner of the continent. The country is bordered by Brazil to the southwest and south, Venezuela to the west, the Atlantic Ocean to the north, and Suriname to the east. Considerable portions of its territories are contested by both Venezuela and Suriname. The large majority of the population lives along the coast while the vast interior is mostly uninhabited. Georgetown is the capital and main port. Area 83,012 square miles, 214,999 square kilometers. Population, 2020 est. 744,300. Officially the Cooperative Republic of Guyana, the country is culturally and historically tied to the former British colonies of the Caribbean. The nation was known as the Colony of British Guiana until 1966, when it received full political independence. However, it remains a member of the Commonwealth. Guyana differs from other South American countries with English rather than Spanish as the official language. Rice, sugar, and bauxite exports contribute the most to the national economy. Land and climate. Guyana is composed of low coastal plains, rolling hills, rainforests, and savannas. The coastal plain, which measures only about 10 miles, 16 kilometers, at its widest point, has been modified greatly by people in the effort to reclaim the land from the ocean. Nearly every coastal community has a seawall to prevent ocean flooding at high tide, and most villages and plantations are crossed by numerous drainage and irrigation canals. The mud and silt that make up the coastal zone are brought from the mouth of the Amazon River by an ocean current. The coastal plain and the interior hills are separated by marshes and swamps. The forested land south of the coastal area gradually rises and has sandy soil. The area gains its name as the White Sands regions because of the sand which covers the hills. Much of the country's center is formed by a plateau that is usually less than 500 feet, 152 meters, in elevation. Guyana's interior is hilly and forested with a grouping of plateaus and mountains. The country's highest point, Mount Roraima at 9,094 feet, 2,772 meters, is at the point where the boundaries of Guyana, Venezuela, and Brazil come together. The mountain is part of the Pacaraima Mountains. Another range is the Acarai Mountain, which rise to about 2,000 feet, 610 meters, in the southern part of the country. In the extreme southwestern part of the country lie the Rupununi savannas, an area of tropical grasses. The Essequibo, Demerara, Corantine, and Berbice rivers all flow northward from the southern highlands into the Atlantic Ocean. The northwest is drained by Pataro, Mazaruni, and Cuyuni, all of which are tributaries of the Essequibo, while the south is drained by the Rupununi. Numerous interior waterfalls prevent long-distance river transportation. With a rainy tropical climate, Guyana experiences high temperatures and humidity with heavy rainfall with little seasonal changes. Georgetown has an average temperature around 80 degrees Fahrenheit, 27 degrees Celsius, and an annual rainfall of 90 inches, 230 centimeters. Trade winds along the coast eases the heat and high humidity. The coastal area has two wet seasons, one from April to August and again from December to early February. The interior does not benefit from the second rainy season. The country's plant life ranges from mangrove forests along the coast to open grasslands in the interior. The wet savanna past the coast plains hosts a variety of palm species along with coarse grasses. Approximately 75% of Guyana is covered with high rainforest that includes a vast amount of tree species including greenheart, willaba, mora, crabwood, siruabali, and the latex-producing ballada. Jaguars, giant anteaters, and tapirs are among the animals native to the Guyanese rainforest. The most common animals are monkeys and deer. The vulture, kiskadee, hummingbird, kingfisher, and scarlet ibis are some of the many birds along the coast and lower rivers, while the macaw, tanamu, and cock of the rock are present in the forest and savanna. Reptile species include caimans, anacondas, bushmasters, and iguanas. People and culture. Guyana's total population is less than 1 million people. Georgetown, the country's main city, has about 280,000 people when its suburban zones are included. More than 90% of the residents inhabit the country's narrow coastal plain. Although Guyanese birth rates are high, especially among rural people, the country's population has not increased greatly in recent decades. Thousands of Guyanese, especially those of West Indian descent, have left the country in search of better opportunities, notably settling in United States, Canada, England, and Caribbean islands. Guyana's ethnic groups are economically and environmentally distinct. The largest group, numbering slightly less than half of the population, are East Indians. They are descended from the 240,000 laborers brought to Guyana from India between 1838 and 1917 as sugarcane estate workers. Their descendants now dominate the country's coastal village areas, where they produce rice and sugarcane as well as a variety of other tropical crops and livestock. The Georgetown area is dominated by black Afro-Guyanese, whose ancestors were African slaves brought by the Dutch and the British. After gaining their freedom in 1838, black freedmen established independent farming villages on the coastal plain, but there has been a steady drift of Guyanese blacks from the countryside to Georgetown ever since. Guyanese blacks comprise somewhat more than one-third of the population. Amerindians constitute less than one-tenth of the country's population and reside mainly in the interior and the far west. Indian groups include the Warao, Warao, Arawak, Carib, Wapisiana, Wapishana, Aracuna, the mixed, Spanish Arawak, of the Morica River, and many more in the forest areas. The Makusi, Makusi or Makushi, are the most prominent of the savanna peoples. Guyana also has small Chinese and Portuguese communities who reside mainly Georgetown. Guyana's history as a British colony makes it the only South American country where English is the official language. A small number of indigenous peoples still speak native tongues, namely the Arawak and Carib languages. Christianity, mainly Protestantism and Roman Catholicism, and Hinduism are the main religions. Islam is the religion of about 10% of the country's population. Georgetown is Guyana's cultural and communication center. The capital hosts the Guyana Museum and the Guyana Zoo. The works of Wilson Harris, A.J. Seymour, E.R. Braithwaite, and Walter Rodney are among the foremost literary writers. The arts often are inspired by the Amerindian culture. The country's 2 daily newspapers and 1 radio station are located in Georgetown and are controlled by the government. In 1988, Guyana's first television station was established under government control, and in 2001, the government began the regulation of all broadcast frequencies. Primary education in Guyana is compulsory. In 1976, the government assumed responsibility for all education, some of which had been church-supported. Although the village schools are crowded and ill-equipped by modern standards, Guyanese education has produced a population in which more than 97% of the people can read and write. However, nearly 10% of the population over the age of 25 has no formal schooling. The University of Guyana is at Turkian, an eastern suburb Georgetown. A number of technical and teacher training schools also provide higher education. Economy. The resulting soils support the cultivation of rice, sugarcane, and other crops in the villages and plantations. Semi-refined sugar is the principal agricultural export of Guyana. Farther south from Georgetown along the Demerara River in a slightly elevated, sandy zone is Linden, Guyana's principal mining center. Bauxite, or aluminum ore, produced in the area, is the chief export. Almost all of the miners are black. Some manganese is produced, and small quantities of gold and diamonds are mined in the Guyanese backlands. Timehri International Airport is 30 miles, 50 kilometers, south of Georgetown on a paved highway. There are daily flights from Guyana to the West Indies, North America, and England. History and government. Carib and Arawak-speaking Indians probably were Guyana's first human inhabitants. The swamps and forests of the coastal zone inspired explorers to refer to the region as the Wild Coast, and European settlement came comparatively late. The Dutch established upriver settlements in the 17th century. In the following decades, Dutch planters imported African slaves and began to move their plantations downriver to take advantage of the fertile coastal soils. By the early 19th century, Dutch and British planters, using European water control technology and an African labor force, were reclaiming large blocks of land along the shoreline. The 3 Dutch colonies of Essequibo, Berbice, and Demerara passed into British hands in 1814. After the British freed the slaves in 1838, indentured Indians were brought to Guyana to help do the plantation work. Smaller numbers of indentured Chinese and Portuguese came as well, all contributing to Guyana's present diversity of peoples. The formation of labor unions in the early 20th century prepared the way for greater measures of local political autonomy. Local self-government emerged in 1953, and independence was granted in 1966. Guyana's first 2 decades as an independent nation were marked by bitter political strife between its 2 principal ethnic elements. The People's National Congress, PNC, is the black, urban political party, which was led by Forbes Burnham, a lawyer trained in London, until his death in 1985. The People's Progressive Party, PPP, the Party of the Rural East Indians, was headed by Chetty Jagan, a dentist who attended Northwestern University in Evanston, IL. The PNC first came to power in 1964 as part of a coalition government, and it won successive elections amid widespread accusations of vote fraud and corruption. The nation has been troubled economically as well. The PNC government nationalized local bauxite holdings, formerly held by a Canadian company, in 1971 and the sugar industry, formerly owned by the British, in 1976. Mismanagement and external market problems led the Guyanese government to declare the country bankrupt in 1982. Severe currency restrictions were instituted, and imports were reduced. Serious food shortages are a recurring problem in Georgetown. Guyana's difficulties are compounded by long-standing territorial disputes with Venezuela to the west and Suriname to the east. A tragedy that was sensationalized by the press of the world occurred in Jonestown in 1978. In it 900 members of a United States religious community committed mass suicide in a Guyanese settlement only a few miles from the Venezuelan border. You can subscribe to support our channel and turn on the notification bell to be notified of new videos.